Hello everyone, my name is Shonda and welcome to my channel Under the Needle. So I told you guys that I was doing a sew along, but it's called a snow along because it is for the snowflake quilt pattern. So this pattern was written by Modern Handcraft and they are also sponsoring, or not sponsoring, but they are also holding this sew along. It begins on Monday, October 25th, and we start sewing blocks 1 through 5. The thing is, when you look at the pattern, it tells you that before you even start blocks 1 through 5, you need to go ahead and get your half square triangles built. So that's what I'm working on right now. I'm working on these half square triangles and kind of wanted to share that with you guys and what I ended up doing for this quilt. Now I did get the entire quilt cut out. So we have all of our squares that we need for this sew along all cut out, plus a few extras for variety. Now the half square triangles I've already started to sew, but these are my squares for my half square triangles. I did decide to go with navy for the actual snowflake. So if you remember the pattern, this is our pattern. Now this particular pattern uses 4 different colors. My printer really needs some work, which I am not doing. I am going with a scrappy layout. So, but it's all monochromatic. So if you notice, all of my fabric is various shades of like kind of blue, some poinsettias, some Christmas balls, some swirls and flourishes, some birds, you know, some tree stuff. Try to get the, yeah. So we kind of got it all ready to go. And so I'm doing my half square triangles. And what made me decide, because I originally had a print, I had some coordinating fabric in the line that I was going to use for my half square triangles. Not for my half square, sorry, for my snowflake. So I was going to use this, right? But I kind of felt like there wasn't significant contrast between some of these colors. So like here, like I just kind of felt like some of the edges of my snowflake might get lost with some of these blues. And then here, you know, I've got, you know, some blues here, you know, some multi kind of colors. Here, some multicolors here, because there's blue and silver, a little white. So I was kind of concerned that if I did use the print from the line that I was actually going to use initially, that I would lose some definition in my snowflake. So I decided not to do that, and I decided to just go with navy. So my other options were white, and someone did recommend silver. I did not want to do white or silver because I did not want to have to be super concerned with fabric placement, because I have some squares in the line that come off very much white or very much silver. So let me try to put it next to something blue for contrast. So this is actually, what this actually is a very light kind of silvery blue, but it's coming off like super white. It's a very light. And same with this print here. This is kind of some blue musical notes on a kind of white or cream background with metallic silver flecks. And I just didn't want to lose any of the background fabric, and I did not want to lose definition between the actual snowflake and the fabric that I'm using. So for that reason, I felt like for me, for this quilt, that the navy would be the best option to really make the actual snowflake kind of pop, and to have the fabric, all the pretty like creams and blues and silvers in the fabric line that I'm using kind of mix together and fade into the background and look very monochromatic, with just the splash of color, this dark snowflake. So that's what I've decided to do. And I did go ahead and put this down. I did go ahead and, like I said, I started my half square triangles. I'm actually sewing them now. Heavens to Betsy. Okay. So these are them. I did go ahead and draw the lines. So they have us doing the 2 at a time method of half square triangle making, which is fine because I am doing scrappy, and so I don't want all the edges of my snowflake to be the same, right? Because that's really where these half square triangles come in. When you look, well, you can't see the pattern, but your half square triangles are coming in these some of these angles here. Like that's a half square triangle right there. And then one on top, that's a half square triangle. Where here, that's a half square triangle. That's a half square triangle. And so I don't want them all to be the same print or the same 2 or 3 prints. I kind of really want it to be all super scrappy. So I'm sticking with that and going 2 at a time. I think I did cut enough to make, I cut 2 extra squares, 1 extra background and 1 extra print in order to have 2 extra half square triangles, just in case I want to play a little bit. I also, this particular line came with a panel. So it was 42. Well, I guess let me start from the beginning. I'm using 2 layer cakes because I've had them for a couple of years, and I'm not really big on Christmas quilts or Christmas fabrics, but this particular fabric line would go great for this particular project because I don't really consider this a Christmas quilt because it's a snowflake, so it's more winter, and I felt like the blue and white was very wintry. Now, I had 2 layer cakes, and each layer cake had a panel, and that panel was 24 by 44, and then I also had 2 yards of coordinating fabric, one being that blue that I showed you earlier, and one being the primary floral print, which, where's that? Where's my primary floral? Actually, I don't think I cut any. I'm not using it. But I'll show it to you. So this is the primary floral in the print. This is the main print. So I have still a yard of this, and then I have a 4-yard cut of this same print for my backing. So I still have quite a bit of fabric left. And I still have, I used one of the panels to cut some of my squares to give variety because there are not a lot of prints in this line. There's only like, I think 9 different prints in the entire line. So that's a lot of repetition. So by cutting out the panel, it kind of gave a little bit more variety to some of the squares because for that panel fabric, each one is just a little bit different, right? Because depending on how the lines fell, so I kind of felt like that gave a little bit more variety given the limited number of prints in this fabric line. It's called Home for the Holidays 2, and it was by Boundless, and I'm pretty sure you can't get it anymore unless maybe somebody's selling it on Etsy. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm going ahead and getting these half square triangles knocked out. So next Monday when we start sewing blocks together, I'll have that already done and worked out. So let's see what else here. I don't recommend ever cutting this from a layer cake. First of all, the layer cakes aren't enough. So my 2 layer cakes would not have been enough to cut out everything that I needed for the snowflake. The only reason I had enough was because I had that panel. And because I had the panel, I was good to go. But I have a ton. When I say a ton, I have a ton of leftover fabric. I'm going to show you guys how much leftover fabric I have. Hold on. It's ridiculous, really. So this was the panel that I used. I used most of this. There's a little bit left, but not too much, but there's some left of the panel. I have one whole panel that I did not use, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that extra yard of fabric that I have and use it as the backing for the panel, and then just put some batting and just quilt it up and just leave it and bind it and leave it just like that. That'll make a nice decoration for Christmas. So I think that's what I'm going to do. But this is how much leftover fabric I have from my 2-layer cakes. It's ridiculous. So there's a ton of waste here. But to me, there was even more waste in buying additional fabric when I could just use this. But I have this whole stack here. These are all about 2.5 by 3 or 2.5 by 3.5. And then I have this big old stack here. These are all about 2.5 or 3, about 2.5 by 10. So tons of leftover fabric. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. I think I might use some of it and make a table runner. Gudrun Erla has a Steady Betty table runner. It is quilt as you go. My only thing is I don't know how big the pieces are that she uses for her quilt. Okay, baby. Love you.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure if my scraps are going to be compatible with that project or not. But it looks like it might be. So I think that it's a quilt as you go pattern. It's table runner. It's one of those things you can get done in a day. So I think I might purchase that pattern and make that table runner to use up some of these. But then after that, I don't know what because I'm not going to make another quilt. I'm not going to keep these forever. I'm just not. I don't do a whole lot of scrap quilting. And usually once I've used a fabric, I don't like to necessarily use it again. So not sure what I'm going to do with all of this. We'll see what I have left after I make my table runner. But I'll show you guys my half square triangles here. All right, so I'm going to readjust my camera so you can see my sewing machine bed and see me sew some of these triangles. And then we'll end the video for today. It's really weird, guys. So I know I'm looking because when you're filming yourself, your inclination is to look at yourself and not necessarily the camera. And so since my camera is here, but my laptop is here, I keep wanting to look over here and look at myself and not look at the camera. So I'm still not quite used to that. So forgive me for that. But we'll see what we can do. All right, so I'm going to lower my camera so you can see my sewing machine bed. You can also see all of my mess. I have so much going on right now. It's ridiculous. Prepping for these 3 sew-alongs and then, you know, the other projects that I've got working on. So I think that might show it pretty well. Let's see. So I did want this to be really precise. I do have diagonal seam tape on my machine. And I have this Steady Betty bridge up here. You probably can't, I don't think, yeah, you can't see the diagonal seam tape. But let's see if we can. No. So basically what I have here is the diagonal seam tape connects to the Steady Betty bridge. And so the Steady Betty bridge, that's a mouthful, isn't it? That is I'm trying to get the camera angle right so you can see the right things, and it's not working for me. This is why I don't film myself sewing, guys, is because trying to get the camera angle right is difficult. Okay. Well, you can't see the needle. I don't know. But now you can see, at least you can see the diagonal seam tape and how it connects to the Steady Betty bridge. So this whole product here, it's called the Steady Betty bridge, right? So this whole product, the thing that it does is that it bridges the gap between your table or your extension table and your machine. That little hole. It bridges that gap. That is what it does. And by doing that, when you have like seams that are flipped the wrong way when you're sewing, a lot of times your seams can get caught on that edge and flipped to the other side. So this helps to keep that from happening. And it does work. Like, it really does work. However, it doesn't work any better or worse than a, what do you call it? A piece of painter's tape. So painter's tape is super cheap, way cheaper than this Steady Betty. And it will also bridge that gap, and it won't leave any residue either. And it won't, you don't mind picking it up. You don't mind taking it up and putting it back down because it's not a big deal, because it's just painter's tape and you can just put another piece on. So let's see, does this show? It's still pretty bad. I don't know. I'm going to pause this and try to get it right. All right, so I think this might be the best it's going to get. So this is the traditional method. Again, I did draw the lines because I really care about this quilt. And also, due to the size of the squares that we are cutting and that we are using, I don't have a whole lot of room to square up, right? Now these are slightly oversized. At least they appear to be in the, well, no, they definitely are. If you know your half square triangle math, which I do somewhat, these squares are a little larger than what is needed. I also am being pretty stingy with my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm basically, I mean, I'm assuming you guys know how to make half square triangles, right? So this is the, this is one of the methods to make half square triangles. You draw a line down the middle of your square, of one of your two squares. Then you, what do you call it? You sew on either side of the line. Could use some more light there. You sew on either side of the line, and then you cut on that line, and then you end up with two half square triangles, which is what I'm going to do now, and then you square them up. Yeah, this is really not, this is not good, guys. I know it's not. I'm going to have to figure this out if I'm going to show you guys this sew along. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this apart. I do love me some Creative Grids. I love their rulers. And my Creative Grids journey actually started with this 6.5 inch square up ruler. This is the first Creative Grids ruler I ever had. Before that, I had exclusively OmniGrid. And that's because I taught myself how to sew, how to quilt. About, when was it? My daughter was born in 96, so probably 98, 99. I did do crochet at first, and I had a couple issues with crochet. One being that I would always forget what stitch I was on, and so I would always either skip a stitch or drop a stitch. I did not realize that there were quilt markers. There were stitch markers that you could use for that, because this was before, you know, I mean, the internet existed, but not in the way that it exists today. So there were no videos. There was no YouTube. So I used to I used to read articles on about.com, because they had a quilting page on about.com, and I used to read those articles, and that's how I taught myself how to quilt, by reading articles and books. So that was how I learned. And then I forgot what I was saying. Oh, 20 years ago. So I went to Walmart and I bought in Joann's and I got like all the OmniGrid rulers that I needed. Basically, I think I had a 5-inch ruler and I know I had a 6.5 by 24 because that's standard. And I think I had a couple other ones. And when I went back to quilting, because I took a break, and when I came back, I think I was at my local quilt shop, and every time I go to my local quilt shop, I try to buy something to support them. Even though I don't typically buy a lot of fabric from them, I usually try to buy something. Sometimes it's fabric, sometimes it's a ruler or some other notion, but I'll usually try to get something. And so I bought this ruler from my local quilt shop, and I was like, oh, this is so much better. It was so much easier to see versus the yellow in the OmniGrid. And the OmniGrid had thicker lines, and then it had that yellow everywhere. And so I found that it was easier to see with a clear ruler. So I switched over all of my rulers. So here are my little half square triangles. I'm going to square them up. I'm not going to tell you what I'm squaring them up to because it is a paid pattern, but I am going to square it up. And I'm going to let you see how little there is to square, how little I'm trimming off. Okay, so I do prefer the block lock. So you can use a regular ruler to square up your half square triangles. Then they make something called a clearly perfect slotted trimmer. With a clearly perfect slotted trimmer, you basically square up your block you trim your block before you iron it. With block lock, you iron it first and then you trim it. I found that I can get kind of aggressive sometimes when pressing my half square triangles, and I can mess up that bias edge. And that middle, I can press this middle part a little too aggressively and it'll press out of shape. And the block lock allows me to fix that mistake. Whereas the clearly perfect slotted trimmer does not. So I prefer block lock, and this is how I square up my half square triangles up to 6.5. Over that, you don't really need this. It's big enough that you don't need a special ruler. If you're squaring up an 8.5-inch half square triangle, you do not need anything like this. I don't think you need a specialty ruler at all. I mean, nobody needs a specialty ruler. That's why they're called specialty rulers. But for me, the block lock is very helpful when squaring up smaller half square triangles. So you just need the one. There's one that's 6.5 inches. And so you can do anything up to 6.5 inches. I do have that one, but it came in a set. So I have a 2.5 inch, a 4.5 inch, which this is, and then I have a 6.5 inch. And anything over that, I don't see the point in, because these are not inexpensive. And I got mine used, because if you watch Amazon, a lot of times they will have used like new or used good or used very good. And you can save quite a bit of money for the same thing. And if you purchase it and it's not what you think it should be, or if it's not up to snuff, or if it's not usable in the way that you think it should, you can send it back to Amazon. But I generally make sure that Amazon is the seller, not a third party, because that's different. But after trimming up our little block, this is all that came off. These little 4 strips. That's it. So there's not a lot of room here. Okay. And this was me being very, very slight with my seam allowance. My seam allowance is definitely not a full 1/4 inch. Let's see here. Let's see if I can show you that here. Put this on my stitch line. I can't show it here very well. No, it definitely doesn't want to. It doesn't want to. It doesn't want to focus. But this is a scant 1/4 inch seam. And for me, that was the best way to ensure that my half square triangle would be correct. So I'm going to go ahead and finish making these up. I don't think you guys need to sit and watch me sew up and trim down 70 half square triangles, but that's what I'm about to do here. So actually, yeah, because I'm making a couple extra. So yeah, this is what I've got going on today. This is what I'm doing, getting ready for this sew along. So because at least with this particular quilt, it's literally just squares. Once you get your half square triangles made, the rest of the quilt is literally sewing squares together into large pieced rectangles and then sewing the rectangles together into your full quilt. So that's what we're doing today. Well, at least that's what I'm doing today, so I can get ready since this pops off on Monday. Yeah. So that's all I have for today. If you've got any questions, if anyone else is participating in this sew along or snow along, I should say, if anyone else is participating, drop me a line down in the comments. Let me know what you're doing, what you're working with, what color schemes you've chosen. I know someone in the comments on my last video did mention that there's like thousands of this quilt on Instagram. And I knew that, but I didn't know that. I mean, I knew that just from a logical perspective, right? Because I saw tons of them just in a Facebook group. So it would make sense that if you followed a specific hashtag on Instagram, that there would be thousands of them. But I did not want to look for them. Like even if Instagram, because I don't naturally use Instagram very often, but even if I was to want to see other quilts, I could just Google it on Facebook and not on Facebook, I could just Google it on the interwebs and get a ton of them. But I didn't want to, because I didn't want to be influenced. I didn't want to see someone else's quilt and be like, oh, I want to make one just like that. I did not want to do that. My goal here was I need to make this quilt from my stash and my stash only without having to purchase any additional fabric. And I did not want to spend, days, weeks, toiling over trying to make my quilt look like someone else's. I really just wanted to find something from my stash that I think that I would like, and that is different for me and unique to me. So that's kind of what I wanted to do here. On the creators page, she did have one where the entire quilt, I don't know if it was done in one print or if it was scrappy, I can't remember, but the entire background portion was like white and silver, and the snowflake was like a light aqua, like an aqua color. And I actually did not like that. I felt like I really wanted the snowflake to pop. And so that's why I'm going with the navy. So I'm really hoping this comes out great. I won't know for about 7 weeks though, because this Snowalong, actually no, 8 or 9, because it hasn't started yet. And then there are 8 full weeks in the snow along. So it'll be 9 weeks before I know how this is really going to look. But I think it'll start coming together before then, as we start putting together more and more of the blocks when all this starts. So I guess what I'll do is I'll hit you guys up. That sounds weird. It's not like I'm calling you on the phone, so I guess I won't be hitting you up, right? I won't be doing that. So I guess what I'm saying is I will make another post for week 1, because right now I'm pre-sewing to prep my half square triangles to have them ready for when week 1 starts. Especially since I'm doing 3 different sew alongs and that all start within 3 weeks of each other. I really want to kind of get ahead of things and get things together, because my goal here really is to keep up. Yeah, my goal here is to keep up. So the other sew along that I'm doing, the Deco sew along, I didn't realize at first that I had jumped the gun, and that week 1, because it starts today. So my Deco sew along starts today, but I did not realize that week 1 was planning, as in choose your fabric. And then week 2 was cutting. And we don't start sewing until week 3. So this is week 1. So I've already planned the quilt because I've already got all my colors. And next week is week 2. So that's cutting, and I've already cut my colors. So I don't have to do anything on that quilt right now, which is good. But I did, just to be sure, I did sew some test blocks using my fabric selections just to make sure I was going to like it. So let me show you those, because they came out great. They actually came out better than I expected. Now, I am going to have to work on my seam allowance, because I don't know what it is, ladies and gentlemen. I have several tools for seam allowance, right? I've got little rulers with holes in it where you line your needle up. I have this one. I have another one that has a scant 1/4 inch. But no matter what, every time I sew a block together, it's never the finished size. It's like never the size that it should be. And the same is true here. So this is when we do start sewing. In week 3 is when we start sewing. We need to make 20 of these blocks in a week. When we start in week 3, I'm already going to be full swing also doing the Snowalong. And I'm going to lose a whole day when I do the sew along with Gudrun Erla in the pattern that she released. So I kind of wanted to get a jump on some of these blocks. And I do love how they came out. I will say that they look better in person than they do on the camera. The colors are true. It's just, I think this this gold color isn't quite as vibrant. It's not reading quite as vibrant as it is in real life. And so it's looking a little washed out, whereas in real life it actually looks a bit more vibrant, and that gold really kind of pops and really kind of brings out the gold colors that are in this fabric here. So these are supposed to be 8.5 inches. Mine are about, probably I'm off by like a 1/4 inch. So I'm probably going to have to do it to where I balance 1/8 inch on each side of the block. So I'll have to keep that in mind when sewing these together. But it also, and this is another reason why I did it, is so that I know that, right? So if I've got to make 20 blocks, I'll probably just chain piece all 20 blocks. So at least if I have these 2 test blocks done first, then it's like, hey, you need to shorten your seam allowance before you make the other 18 blocks to maybe, help compensate or maybe reduce your shortage from being a 1/4 inch short to maybe only 1/8 inch short. But yeah, I don't really know what happened with that. I don't know if it was my cutting was a little off, which could definitely be. But I think what I'm going to do is when I put these blocks, the rest of the blocks together, I'm going to make that seam allowance a little smaller, and hopefully I will get a better size block. One thing on this quilt is that all seams are pressed open, which I almost never do, which means it's going to take longer for these to go together. Also, they're log cabin style, so you're having to press after each piece. So these are going to take some time to put together. And if I'm doing another sew along as well, But just to show you guys a real quick hack before I go, when you're trying to keep your stuff together to take to your sewing machine, where is it at? Hold on. I know that people make design boards, right? And I actually have one that I semi-made. I took the styrofoam piece, I layered it with batting, but then instead of like gluing binding fabric around it to make it pretty, I literally just took duct tape and put it around. And so that's how I did my design board. Because I wasn't sure if I was going to use it. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it. I wasn't sure if it was going to be the right size for me or not. So I didn't want to make a bunch of them and then have it not be right. But one thing that always works, here we go. Okay, so I hope my booty isn't in the, hope my booty wasn't in the camera. If you have any kind of square up ruler, or even if you don't have a square up ruler, if you've got a lid, if you've got a container, right? And if you have a microfiber cloth, there's something about this microfiber, it grips, right? So it doesn't just, well, of course now it wants to slide on me, but yes, it can slide, but I find that for my microfiber, one side is a little stickier than the other, but I find that it doesn't easily just slide. If I put it, 90 degrees, yes, it's going to slide, but generally it doesn't just start sliding. It'll kind of stay, it'll kind of stay in place on the ruler. And then when you put your fabric up here, it doesn't move at all. So if you don't have a design board, and if you don't feel like making a design board, if you happen to have a microfiber cloth in your home, you can just use that on any surface. And this stuff, this stuff stays on. Like, I don't know if you could hear it. Like, I can hear it coming off. Like, it does not want to come. It will not. It will not. Okay, you gotta kill it to make it come off. It's not just gonna slide off. And to me, this sticks better than batting on my design board. So if you really want to get your pieces up there, especially doing something log cabin-ish, you can always get you some microfiber cloths and use these to make a design board, which is actually what I might do, because I find that to me the fabric just really, really sticks to these microfiber cloths. And so if you've got a pack of them, because normally, like, I buy the ones that are like for your car, because when you buy the ones for the kitchen, they cost twice as much as when you buy the ones for your car. So I buy the ones for my car, and usually you get a pack of like 30 of them. And so if you want to know what to do with them other than in your kitchen or your bathroom, they have another use in your sewing room, because the fabric just, it's not going anywhere. So that's all I have today. This is week 1. I'm pre-sewing, getting ready for week 1 of the Snowalong, which starts on October 25th. So that is all for me today. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you want to see, and I will see you next video.